The Beginner's Guide is more than just a game about games. It even goes beyond the game about making games thing, although that is its primary focus, and takes you all the way to the nature of player interpretation and all the discussions and opinion pieces born of such an interlinked, communicative culture such as the online games community. Creators can't manage player perceptions or control the way their games register with people. Hopefully they wouldn't want to. And the game displays the potential turmoil and anxieties involved in the process of creating a game, or anything for that matter. While it's implied several times that the developer in question, Coda, makes games mostly with the intent of never releasing them, our narrator proceeds to tell us that he had convinced Coda to share his work. The narrator goes on to show Coda's games to others, further removing his creations from the safety of his influence, moving them further into the ongoing dialogue of devs, games, and players. Many people make for many meanings. A wider audience gives birth to more interpretation and more opinion. An isolated, insular creative can struggle to function in such an environment. Needless to say, the attention has an impact on Coda's work. The Beginner's Guide hit me in a strange way. Not being a developer, but having a great love of the medium, I have strong opinions regarding certain games and very definite ideas as to what certain other games are trying to say and do. But I've also grown up enough in recent years to know that nobody is duty-bound to care at all about what I think, and I'm more aware than ever of the impact that even words of encouragement can have on creative people. It's hard to face the world, your peers, and all your insecurities, and give form to an idea. With the Stanley Parable, Davey Wreden played a part in messing with players' heads. Lots of subverted expectations and fourth wall breaking metatextual humour. The Beginner's Guide is far more earnest, a very personal jaunt through a fictional creator's slow slide from view, and the constant struggle all creators face. That persistent feeling that they'll never be as prolific, honest, or content as they would like to be in their work. Just as a little aside here, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that games are a very versatile and dynamic medium. Walking simulators like this, and I really do hate that term, show off the fact that you can pay £5 for a game and in only 90 minutes you can come away changed. It's like, what, £9 for a cinema ticket these days? People want lots of bang for their buck. So films keep getting longer, and most of them can't really fill the time. Lots of flab. Games aren't that much different. If you can hone a fantastic story or idea or aesthetic down into a game the length of a Dread or a Clerks, then you should do it. Our time is our most valuable resource, and none of us have enough of it.
Artifice is an interesting thing, and I find that games don't often look at it with any degree of elegance. Drawing attention to the cracks and seams of the gamer's world is either done with a wry eye and some poor humour, or it's deconstructed over the length of a game to prove some mechanical or story-related point. I can't think of many games that really wrestle with the concept beyond the Stanley Parable, so I guess it's no surprise that Davey Wreden's second game, The Beginner's Guide, follows up on this idea, and goes even deeper with it. In works like this, the author's footnotes are often obscured, but when one of Coda's games tasked us with cleaning up a bookshelf, I thought it would be a good call to take a closer look. It's generally pretty useful to look at books in games because they often have little jokes in them or references to outside works. The Desire to Live in Dark Souls is one of these, I guess. And sure enough, two books had their textures much clearer than the others. One was Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveller, and the other was Susan Orlean's The Orchid Thief. I'm fairly certain that there was also Danny Luski's House of Leaves and Only Revolutions there, but they were much lower resolution, so it was a lot harder to tell. Whether Coda is supposed to be Wreden or not doesn't really matter. The Wreden of the game is to some degree fictionalised anyway, and the distinction doesn't really take away from the overall emotional impact. It's a very sincere game, and it deals with insecurity and creativity, how the two go hand in hand but without really correlating them in traditional ways. In presenting this collection of games by an enigmatic loner, Wreden attempts to unpack their personality. What can we learn about this person from the way they bend the source engine and the gaming environments to their will? They're all pretty important, because with the exception of The Orchid Thief, which I'll get back to in a second, they're all works that place a heavy emphasis on artifice and the layered meaning possible when the mechanisms of construction are interfered with. The relevance of The Orchid Thief is due to the fact that it was used as the driving force of the plot of Adaptation, a Charlie Kaufman film where he writes himself as a character that's trying to write a film about the book, and then his invented brother hangs on to him for the rest of the film, trying to kickstart his own career, which is a pretty pertinent link, as Coda and Wreeden share a few things together, and the splitting of them into narrator and subject distills various parts of this one guy's essence into two conflicting characters, and highlights something that it's often hard to focus on in games: the humanity of the people who make them. I don't really want to go on about these books and films too much, because I think you should just go out and read them and watch them yourself and explore how they experiment with the way that they're constructed. And I know that the beginner's guide isn't for everyone, but it strives towards something that is often seen as unattainable within this sphere of entertainment. It focuses on interiority and the quiet, unspoken things that games often try and blot out of existence. It isn't motivated by mechanics or spectacle, though it's frequently very impressive to behold, but instead it's propelled by a genuine desire to think about what it means to be, what it means to create, to respond, and ultimately to meddle. Because what do players really do in games but meddle with them? They're presented with systems and problems and worlds, and they're put in them and they're asked to fix them, essentially. In games it often works, but I find it doesn't really apply to the real world very often. And maybe a side effect of the gamification of life is an attempt to solve problems that don't really exist. Some cracks can't be papered over, no matter how hard you try, and the beginner's guide is flawed, but it's intensely sincere. It strives to tell us something in a language that doesn't aid its telling. Beyond all its artifice and its possible pretense, this is still one of the most affecting games I've played in a long time. It's the closest I've come to crying at a video game in recent memory, and for that reason alone it should be lauded, and everyone should give it the time of day. Sometimes I think that the best things that video games can do for us are make us think or ask questions. And with the beginner's guide, at the very worst you could learn something about yourself, or games, what they can do to us, and what we can do to them.